Greetings, Patrick here. Welcome to another edition of Eight Questions with. It is a brutally cold southeastern Michigan night. It is about 0 degrees out there with a wind chill factor making it over minus. We got about 6 inches of snow that we got from this last weekend's worth of storms, and Um, shout out to our good friends Mike and Elena who came over and bailed yours truly out with the shoveling of my driveway. I got about half of it done plus my sidewalk, but it was absolutely so cold. I decided to work it in halves. Well, they took pity on me and came over and bailed me out. Hey Anthony, how are you? Stephen is here. Thank you so much. We will be talking with the very, very, very accomplished Sally McLean tonight. Yeah, this is honestly, this is a heavy hitter. Definitely. Uh, um, in fact, I dare say, quite up there. Her list of accomplishments and awards and hard work is quite amazing. She was born in the UK and she is based in Australia, but she can do international work. She's appeared in a lot of really cool TV shows, including Preacher, um, which I actually have a couple of seasons of that. I got to see if I got her in my on the 2 seasons I have a Preacher. Preacher I ran for 4 years, I believe, on AMC, and it did pretty well from what I understand. I didn't get a chance to see it, but I do have, like I said, I do have a couple of seasons. Or I have it in my collection. Um, Sally also is a tremendous advocate of Shakespeare. She loves Shakespeare, and that's a good thing because it's one of the questions I always ask is like, what is it about Shakespeare that seems to be like the actors? That's like the touchstone of every single actor is working with Shakespeare. Uh, I, I mean, I read some of his works. I watched some of his movies. It still gets away from me, maybe because I'm not an actor. But I just like to understand the love affair between Shakespeare and acting. Let's see. Yeah, I this is one I gotta admit I got really lucky. I just reached out and I asked Sally. I said, would you like to come and be a guest on the show? And she's graciously said yes. This is one of those totally by like I can't believe it. Once I'm sitting here and reading her background and I'm going like, yeah, how did I get her? Most of the time when I get an actor at this level, when I approach an actor at this level, I have no chance. I just don't. Um, and because I don't know why. Probably because they're too busy. Um, but yeah, but then again, that's all right though because luck comes in many styles and different levels. Um, we were supposed to interview Mitch Lang last week. Mitch got sick, and he sent us one of his mermaids. And we talked to Red last week, and I got to tell you, I got so much feedback from that show. Not in the comment section so much, but personal messages sent to me on my Instagram saying, "Wow, that lady was fun. That was a really good show. That was and I agree. I didn't know who Red Flanagan. I know that she played Mermaid number two um, in the movie, and but she kicked ass. I enjoyed the hell out of that show, and it was so much fun to do. And I a lot more. I got a lot of feedback from that. So I appreciate it, and I really appreciate the fact that you guys are going to come here today to watch our interview with Sally McLean. Hopefully, I can hold my own here. Hopefully, I can hold my own because I'm not kidding you. This is gonna be one of those ones where you got to be on your toes if you're an interviewer because Sally has massive skills, tons of awards, works with some of the greatest people. just an amazing artist. And yeah, I put her. Steven says here, oh, okay, thank you so much, Steven. Yeah, more guests, that'd be great. More guests are always a good thing. I put Sally's her amazing personal webpage. I put that up there on the top of the chat there. Highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. I'll put all her personal. I'll put all her personal links down there, all social media links down in the bottoms as soon as the show's over with. And you guys can go ahead and follow her. She is on Instagram and she is on Threads and yep. All right. So what's going on in February? So we got a busy week. We got some busy week. Tomorrow night we'll be talking with actor Frank Marino Boyd. He'll be here at 8 o'clock. Thursday on the 20th, we're doing one show. It's an afternoon show. Afternoon show here in the States. At 3 o'clock, we will be interviewing our good friend Mike Zahara from Did You See That? And congratulate him on getting one of these. Yep, that's right. He got one of those Green Lantern. He got one of those Green Lantern rings. Um, so we'll be talking with Mike on Thursday, and the newlywed, and I'm so glad to be able to. I'm glad he's going to be able to talk to us. I thought, well, gosh, you're going to be on your honeymoon, right? I don't know, but hey, he said he come talk to us, so that's what we're going to do. So that will be at 3 o'clock. There will not be a night show on the 20th. There will not be a night show. There will only be the show with Mike at 3 p.m. Okay. And then on the 23rd, I bobbled this last week, but I got it right this week. So we're doing a double header on Sunday. Sunday, we're doing a double header. We are doing on JT's channel, me and the Cheater, we're flying over there to hang out with JT. We're doing Clash of the Titans on JT's channel at 4 p.m. JT he's going to talk about The Last of the Mohicans, starring Daniel Day-Lewis, multiple Oscar winner Daniel Day-Lewis, and I will be championing in the 13th Warrior with Antonio Banderas. And let me tell you, I've made many comments out here about hearing Antonio Banderas and hearing him as Puss in Boots. Do not hear that when I do watch the 13th Warrior. Do not hear it. It's weird. I watched it twice so far. I'm waiting for that Puss in Boots, to kick in, not kick it in. It's probably is my very favorite movie of his. It's one of my favorite movies in general. So I'm really happy to talk to JT about The Last of the Mohicans with an awesome score, and of course, 13th Warrior with some superb action. So we'll be talking about those two movies at 4 o'clock on JT's channel with the Midnight Society. And then at 8 o'clock, we will be back on the road, heading over to Ben for Gadara Club. It is the ISC Midnights, and we will be talking about Contracted. The film is called Contracted, and we will be covering that on the 23rd at 8 o'clock. It looks really good. I own a copy of the movie. I own it. I have not watched it yet, but I will be watching it. And I do know one of the actresses in it. I probably have asked her probably about a dozen times to come on to the show. Have not been able to do it yet, but maybe this time. And I want to say one special small thank you too for the ISC show. Super excited to say that one of our shows went over 1,000 view mark, which doesn't seem like a lot for a lot of people, but it's a massive success for us. Just considering that we do 2 hour, basically between 90 minutes and 2 hour long shows. Those are really hard for rewatch. Sometimes they can be real hard for rewatchability, but one of our shows seems to really is doing very well now, and that is Bound to Vengeance. That's right. The Bound of Vengeance was absolutely. Hey, Harry, how are you, sir? All right. Uh, uh, Glad you're here. Glad you're here. Hopefully, you'll stick around to come meet Sally McLean. Um, she will be here shortly. And yes, I just checked over there, and she just knocked on my door. So you know what that means. Whenever there's a door knock, we go get our guest. Yes, it's very long. We have to too long. But please help me welcome in actress and director and all sorts of wonderful all around artists, multi hyphenate, um, Miss Sally McLean. And here we go.
Hello.
Hello, how are you? How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
I almost beat my feet backwards, Sally, when I was looking at your background. I'm going like, I don't know what God is looking out for me, but I was looking at your background and I'm going like, man, this is a heavy hitter right here. This is a supremely talented artist, and am I going to be good enough to hold my own with her and ask her some really intelligent questions? Um,
Of
your
course you will.
background, your background blew me away, blows me away.
Thank
Uh,
you. I've been busy for a while. So been doing it for a little while. So yeah. Thank you. That's a very lovely introduction. Um, no, I tend to do a lot of things, as you may have noticed.
yeah,
So,
I noticed that, and I'm going like, but luckily there's one saving grace I do have when I do this show, and that is I'm extremely curious. This really works well when you're doing a show like this because you have to be that way. If you walk inside of it and you're just like, okay, I got a few questions to ask. Sometimes you run across someone like yourself, and then you get blown out of the saddle because you're not ready. You're not ready. You're just going in there and like, okay, I'll ask my same basic elite 10 questions, which I do not. Um, but some interviews do. They come in there and they go like, okay, I got my 10 to 15 questions. They're the root questions that we ask for everybody they interview, and it's just like you got to do your homework. You got to sit there and say you just can't ask her some basic questions. You can look what she's been doing. Look what she has accomplished. There's so much to talk about. It's so rich, and it's just almost like eating dessert before you eat dinner. It's like it's so good. There's so much to go for. Where do we start? Um, our good friends are here. Steven's still here. I think he's going to be leaving soon, but he's here. And the Harry Experience is here, and saying hello to you. The one thing I noticed right off the bat too was, and this is actually going for after going for over 2 years without getting anybody from Australia. I've actually now have interviewed two people within a matter of weeks, so I'm glad to be able to go back down under. It is what 10:30. Is it? It's what is it? Is it 10 o'clock in the morning in Australia?
no,
On
it's midday. I got my times wrong. I thought it was
oh
earlier, but it's midday, so it's quite civilized to be having a conversation at this time of the day.
yeah,
Fruit time, basically.
that's a good time to talk. The
Yeah.
earliest I ever got though, I actually interviewed somebody who I thought that's what I was interviewing. I thought it was going to be mid time, and then they were like, no, it's 9 o'clock in the morning here. And then I got really nervous about it because I'm like, okay, well, this person needs to be going to school. And I'm like, am I interfering with your school? And her mom says, no, 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 she doesn't go to school till later. So then I didn't feel so bad. And Harry says it's 4 a.m. over here in Kenya. So this is a international show, that's for sure. Um,
Definitely.
yeah, he left Dubai and now he's here in Kenya. Wow. Okay. So I mean, you got a couple of jet setters here. I'd like to your biography says you were born in the UK and now you're Australian based. Um,
Yes, I lived in the UK, but I was born in Australia. I did live in the UK though for quite a time, and then came back. Yeah.
that's interesting. Let's talk a little bit about that, because most people would think that the UK would have it over Australia in terms of, either screen acting or stage acting. There would be more opportunities in the UK than there would be in Australia. So why Australia?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, the issue that I had with staying in the UK, I went over there as a young adult and unfortunately didn't have the right visa to stay longer than a few years. And so you have to have right of residency. I think it's a parent that was born in the UK. And unfortunately, I had a great grandparent, but that doesn't count. So that's why I came back. But going to the UK was for exactly the reason that you suggest, which is that there was a lot more opportunity for work. But also, in my case, I wanted to study drama in the UK. So just because I felt that the training there at the time was just I wouldn't say superior, but actually just more up to date. We actually, in Australia, a lot of our drama schools were founded by people that were British.
Right.
There were a couple of Americans, but mainly British. So, but it kind of had been a period of time where I didn't want to do a 3-year course in the standard way either. And there really wasn't anything here that offered a post-grad option that I wanted to do. And the UK offered that. So my initial reason for going to the UK, I would have been in my early 20s, was to actually study at RADA, the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. And I got an audition and that was all fabulous. And I got on the plane and I flew over and I got laryngitis on the plane. And I got to the audition with no voice and I still tried to do my pieces and they stopped me and said, Sally, we can't even hear you. I'm so sorry, but we're not going to be able to audition you this year. We'll hold your
Oh,
place for an
wow.
audition for a year. And I went, but I've just flown thousands of miles to be here. So I ended up deciding to stay in the UK. I thought I'm not flying home after missing that audition. I'm not flying straight home. So,
Don't they
excuse
have
me, so I stayed.
don't they have something like that built into contingency? I'm sure it's not the first time that that's happened. Where the audition where the actor is going to be coming in and maybe they're not feeling the best or having the best voice. There's no such thing as like a second call or second chance.
No, apparently not at the time. I mean, I'm presuming now they hopefully do, but at the time, no. So, no. So I ended up staying and working initially, just doing some temp work. And then the agency that I'd registered with to do temp secretarial work basically said, we work for the BBC as well. Would you like us to try to get you in there? And I said, sure, why not? Yeah, that'd be good. So I ended up working in the BBC doing temp work as a production secretary. And that's where I then landed a full-time job working at the BBC in production, which was a complete left field step. It was not expected. That was not the plan, but I decided to go with the opportunity when it came up. So I ended up working for the Music and Arts Department for Sir Rolly Keating, as he is now, but at the time he was Rolly Keating, who was executive producer for several flagship programs for the BBC Music and Arts Department, such as Bookmark and One Foot in the Past and other such things, all documentary based, but arts based. And so, so then I worked there. And then I suddenly went, after a year, I thought, wait a minute, I was meant to be auditioning for drama school. That was the plan. And I, by that stage, decided I didn't really want to go to RADA, but I found another college, another university that was also affiliated, funnily enough, with an American studio in New York called the Actors Institute. The Actors Institute in New York was run by Ted Danson.
Right.
And several others. And they had a UK branch of that studio. And so I decided, okay, that's where I'll audition. And I got into that one. So that's why I stayed in the UK beyond the year. Went and did that.
You can't hold talent down. You just can't do it. You might have gotten sick, but it doesn't take away that you have your skills. And so I'm not really surprised to hear what you just said. Like I got another audition and knocked it out. And to me, it's like, that right there is enough for me to sit there and say, well, probably it'd be a good thing for people to, like, if you have a list of people you want to audition for and they come in there. I mean, there's a reason why they're there. So instead of just sitting there and going watching, well, they just got done flying 6,000 miles to see you, instead of just immediately, well, we can't have you this year. It would behoove you as a casting director to sit there and say, you know, let's have these people come back in 1 month, and then we'll go ahead and then we'll do it again. We'll do it again. And because you look what they lost and look what you gained.
Well, yeah. And I mean, look, I think I've got a big belief that sometimes life does not work out how you planned and instead hands you something that is so much better. So I'm not saying RADA would have been a terrible experience. It would have been great to go to RADA, but I think for me, going to the Actors Institute and getting the kind of training they were providing was exactly what I needed at that time in my life and in my career. And they were very much working professionals who were teaching. So it was all up-to-date current information. We were working with people from all over Europe who were coming in and doing special classes. We worked with West End directors. We worked with people from the States. We got to work with an awful lot of people, and it was a postgrad degree. So it meant that I wasn't there for 3 years. So, and I'd been working in the industry beforehand over here in Australia as an actor professionally as well before I trained. So I think it was perfect for me to go to that particular college. And there's always an option down the track, maybe to do another PhD at RADA, do masters or PhD at RADA because they offer them. So if I really want to do that, I could apply. But I think doing that postgrad course was probably the best thing for me at the time. So, the universe, fate, whatever, stepped in and said, nope, actually do this. This is better. Do this now. So, yeah, so I did. So I am actually grateful for all of that. And also, to be honest, if I had got into RADA, I would never have landed at the BBC. And I think I would have missed that opportunity. And that was a huge learning curve in production with learning from the best in the business. So I was incredibly lucky to land there. So I'm kind of grateful that RADA didn't have that policy.
You mentioned how you had to go home. You didn't have the right work visa. I mean, I was
actually able to change my visa, which was interesting. So they don't allow you to do it anymore, but I was allowed to swap my visa while I was in England.
Okay.
Which is how I stayed. But yeah, once I graduated,
how did you actually?
Sorry.
I was going to ask you, how did you end up being able to stay for the extra 3 years? I mean, once they told you like, well, we can't, we're not going to be able to use you or have you audition this year. Wouldn't it, that would was your visa? Was it only? Do they issue visas only for specific things that you're telling them that you're going to be doing?
Yeah, they do. But we have a reciprocal agreement, or we did. I presume we still do. I don't know. With the UK, that's called a holiday working visa. So we actually, as Australians, can. You've got to be under the age of 30, I think, to do it. But you can actually get a 2-year working visa on that arrangement. And I'd initially turned up just on a holiday visa. It wasn't even a proper visa because I wasn't even sure I would get in to RADA. So it was done once. If I got into RADA, we would have switched it across to a student visa, which is the other kind of visa we can get. So because that didn't happen, I decided, all right, I'm going to activate the holiday working visa, which I could do from within the country, which was fine. And that's how I stayed for that next year. And then when I got into the Actors Institute, we switched to a student visa. So that's how I then stayed for that. And then when I graduated, the BBC, the phone wasn't ringing off the hook. I wasn't, suddenly getting all these offers of work. So my boss, Rolly, rang me and said, are you working at the moment? And I said, no, funny you should ask. No, not really. And he said, well, I'm about to head up a new department for the BBC. Do you want to come work for me again? And I said, yes, money would be very nice because London's expensive. That would be great. And so that's when I was sponsored by the BBC to stay there and work with them.
That's
how that all worked.
We have a question from our friend Stacy. She's already come with some questions. See, Harry wants you to speak British with a British accent. Um,
Sorry. Yeah, go on. On
so
demand. Yes, go on.
he wants to hear a little English accent. And then Stacy says she wants to know if he had fun being on Kath and Kim.
Oh goodness, Stacey's done her homework.
Mhm.
All right. British accent, yeah, I don't know. I haven't had to do one for quite a long time. My accent to Australians sounds quite English. I'm quite sure it doesn't outside of Australia, but it does. It does here.
You do
Can we
sound
just talk
Australian.
about that?
You do sound Australian.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Excellent. No, good. Because that was actually a problem when I got back because I sounded incredibly English. And I kept getting asked if they could see my work visa here in Melbourne. And I was like, I was born here. But yeah. So let's hold on that one for a minute. As far as the Catholic, I will have a think about it and get my brain in gear for that. But as far as the Kath and Kim, yeah, that was fun. That was a really unusual job because I was hired to be Gina Riley's body double. Now, normally that just means you stand in place while lighting is happening and all the rest so that Gina could be in her trailer while that was happening. But it was actually an acting body double because Gina and Jane play a couple of different characters in the series. It was the third series, I think. They played Prue and Trude, which were the terribly snobby women that work in a home decor retail space, and also Kath and Kim. And they had decided in that series that these characters would interact. So I actually had to play both Kim and Trude, which was the other character that Gina played, opposite Gina while she was playing the other character, which was a really strange thing to do when you're working with, two of the greatest comedians, female comedians, particularly that our country have produced, and you're playing their characters back to them. It's kind of bizarre to do it as a job. And really odd because no one ever sees your work. Only they see your work and the crew because they're filming you from the back.
Now you're sitting there. They're facing you. Kim and Kath are facing you and another actor, and then they're doing their dialogue so they have someone in front of them, and then they switch it around and they become the other two characters, and you become Kim and Kath.
Correct, and you have to do the other dialogue as the other character. Yeah. So, I had to do Kim, and I was wearing Gina's wig. I was wearing Gina's costume as Kim and being filmed from behind while she was playing Trude, acting towards me. And then we'd get all of the Trude dialogue done that she had to do. And then we'd go into wardrobe and swap costumes and then flip around. And then I'd be dressed as Trude. She'd be back as Kim, and I'd do all of Trude's dialogue to her and she'd do Kim's dialogue. It was surreal. It was I don't know how I feel about this, but when I was particularly dressed in the Kim costume with the wig, I would have crew come up to me from behind on set and go, "Oh, Gina, sorry. Oh, so sorry. I thought you were Gina."
Right.
I don't know how I feel about that. I was obviously Gina. Yeah, Kim is a very out there kind of character.
I take it that was a comedy, right? Because you on your because you predominantly do comedy. That's your specialty, right? You're more of you see yourself more as a comedian actor, or do you see yourself more as a comedian actor, or just an all around actor, or do you see yourself as maybe a dramatic actor?
I see myself as kind of all round, I guess. And look, again, back to your comment about Australia not being as busy a landscape as, say, the UK. You kind of, if you discover that you can do more than one genre of performance, then you just embrace it and run with it because it means you're going to get cast more. So for me, for television particularly, I tend to get comedy a lot more. And then if you get into the realm of sort of digital series or web series and then things like film, I tend to get more dramatic roles, which is interesting. And I'm very happy to do both. Both is a challenge, but the comedy is kind of fun. And we've got a really strong comedy scene over here. We haven't for years had sketch comedy shows. We used to have a lot, kind of like SNL and that sort of stuff. We used to have a lot of those shows here. We haven't interestingly, in the last probably decade. Long overdue. If any Aussie producers watching this, please create another sketch comedy show. We need them because it provides more work. But it is interesting that most of my TV stuff, I'm just having a think actually, over the last probably 5 or 6 years has all been comedy. In fact, I'll be appearing in a Netflix series that comes out later this year, which is also a comedy out of Australia. So it's comedy is the thing and paying the bills. And that's great as far as I'm concerned.
I was going to
And
ask
even
you,
when I get called in for commercials, same thing.
Which one do you, like I've seen, some actors, they do comedies and some actors do dramatic. I'm just thinking as far as working in a series go, wouldn't it be better to do a dramatic series because there's like the show's on longer, like it's an hour-long show. They tend to have much bigger casts. If you get cast in one of the series leads, you tend to be more on camera in a dramatic series more than a comedy. But then a comedy, you have probably a little bit more flexibility as far as you're not going to be working that week, so maybe you can do something else instead. What have you found to be more easier to do as far as workload goes? I mean, is it easier to do dramatic versus comedy? I would think as an actor, I think I would tend to want to do more work, so I would think I would try to lean toward dramatic roles.
Well, I think, yeah, absolutely. But the biggest issue that actors have, and this is not just in Australia, this is in the US, this is the UK, anywhere in the world, is that casting directors or casting directors and producers and directors see you in a certain way. So you're going to get, until you're in a position such as Cate Blanchett or that level, you're kind of going to only get offered certain kind of things and certain kind of genres because they know you're reliable in that genre. So when I say that, I mean, would I prefer to do drama? Well, I'm also a writer. So I'm actually writing myself a drama series at the moment, which is one way to say to people, hey, I do other things. Because there's a lot of comedy that gets, and we make a lot of comedy over here too. I mean, Australia's not as, how do I put this? Because of the fact that Australia is a smaller population, as far as government, when we are lucky in the sense we do get government funding for some of our film and TV projects, but there really isn't a lot of money around to have really large casts in dramas and have really good, large locations. And we often do limited series here rather than 22 episode series. We used to do that back in the day, but there isn't a lot of money around at the moment. So most of the drama stuff we're producing is 6 episode arcs or 8 episode arcs.
You know what? I was just going to say, this is my first time experiencing this. And so I'm on the tube and I've seen clips of this show and I'm like, this is a really cool show. What's this show all about? And so I follow, I find out. And then I'm like, all right, great, that's awesome. It's a drama, and so a couple of weeks ago, I was at my local library, and they're doing the sale, and I managed to find the first season of this Australian, because I'm always looking for Australian, New Zealand shows, and the show I got. In fact, I thought when I looked at it, I thought, oh, I almost put it back because I thought it was only half the season. I didn't realize till I read the back of it. It says 6 episodes. I'm like, there's only 6 episodes in the season, and the show is called Mr. In Between with Scott Ryan.
Oh yes.
And so I love the show. That show is great.
It is.
But and so, but when I read it, I thought it's only 6 episodes. So because I know the UK does between 10 to 13 episodes.
Yep.
And that basically is not, it's driven based on budget, right? So
very much. Yeah, very much. It's expensive to make TV, wherever you are. but even when you don't pay your actors $1 million an episode, which is, Friends notoriously did, and other series have, it's still expensive to make. And yeah, unfortunately, our screen industry here is not rolling in cash. Although we've actually got a lot of co-productions going on now with places like NBC Universal and with production houses here that are now part of their stable, and also with a couple of UK production studios as well. So that does, like ITV Studio and others, so that does bring in some extra cash. But it also means it brings in an American actor usually, or a UK actor, which means less work for the Aussie actors. So, it's...
But don't they have it where, like, I know Canada, they have up there, I think it's like most productions up in Canada have to be at least, I want to say, it could be wrong, but I want to say when most Canadians, I think it's like 70%. It's like they got to have 70% of Canadian actors in the role. And the same thing with the music too. The radio programs is like you got to be able to have at least, it's like 65 to 70% of the music you're playing has to be Canadian, because a lot of it is subsidized by the government.
Yeah. Content quotas, they're a good thing, and Australia's been pretty weak at actually doing that with some of our international partners. So that's actually a huge conversation going on right now with our union and with the actors union, and also with the Screen Producers Association here, where they're pushing for quotas, but we're no way near that percentage. We're saying 25%, please, which is, we'll get there, but at this point,
that was the first time, and I'm glad we're talking about this, because like for the first time that I can think of, I can't think of an American show that transferred from America to Australia, but then it happened. Then you guys did NCIS Sydney. Yes. And now it's basically off. And I'm going like, really? That's interesting. Okay, so I'm thinking to myself, I'm going like, okay, are they going to who's going to get cast? What American actor is going to carry the show? Turned out none. There's no American actors leading that show. It's all Australian.
And this, which is a good thing. And clearly, because that particular brand really want to place those characters in that city, and they therefore just by default will cast the Aussie actors. Yeah, when that got announced, everybody was thinking the same thing here. What American actor is going to be transplanted out of New York or whatever and brought to Sydney? And we were all quite delighted when we found out they are actually casting Aussie actors and doing it deliberately because it's right for the brand. So we get good things like that quite, here and there too, which is good.
I can't imagine. To me, when I saw the, Mr. In Between had a 6-episode season, I'm just thinking to myself, going like, how does an actor even sink his teeth into the character long enough to understand it or develop it when you're already done with 6 episodes? And then you sit there and like, okay, so what's gonna, that's 6 episodes. So you got to wait till 46 more, and with the attention span that the public has, you're not giving any show a fighting chance. All that hard work that you do, all that training as you do, and you go out and audition and you get these roles. Oh, we got a role in Mr. In Between, but you're only going to be on there for 6 weeks. And then that's it. And then you expect the public to keep you. What do you do to keep yourself first and foremost in the public eye? It's got to be super hard to gain any traction as an actor.
I would say yes. I'd say here it can be very much so. And that's how you end up doing, things such as what I do, which is you go create your own work. Mm-hmm. And you also do theatre. So many of our TV actors and film actors here also do theatre.
Yeah.
So they might do it at the top end theatre companies such as Melbourne Theatre Company or Sydney Theatre Company, or they do it at independent theatre such as, which I do a lot of, which is at various venues around Melbourne and Sydney and Brisbane, particularly up the East Coast. Western Australia have several places, and Adelaide definitely has several theatres as well. That's where you tend to find actors in between gigs where they're keeping their skills sharp, and also just getting to play characters they may not get cast in film and television to also expand their repertoire. And obviously then that gets reviewed, you get audiences going, you get, and producers and film people will go check that out too to see what other actors are doing. So that's theatre is, we tend to be all-rounders over here most of the time. It's rare to find an actor that's only specialising in screen, because the work's just not frequent enough. So we transition between the mediums, or you make your own stuff. And that's usually through web series or short film or feature film. I know several actors actually this year, they're in the process of doing feature films, which again is all run on the smell of an oily rag. Everyone's doing it for the love of it, but it's also done because it's another way to get yourself in front of audiences. And also when you're involved in creating those projects, it's a chance to create roles that you really want to play that you might not get looked at. So we tend to be quite inventive over here as to how do we keep ourselves occupied and focused. But also I can tell you there are a lot of actors who run a second job to keep body and soul together, because you kind of have to. And look, that's the same pretty much everywhere.
I was gonna say, I don't really, other than the normal people, when you think of Australia, to me, I'm thinking, even if you were someone like like yourself or Scott Ryan, it's like you mentioned, over here they pay actors, tremendous amount of money per show, per season, per show, and I just can't imagine them walking out there and giving anybody, more than, maybe $25,000 per episode, and that might be the lead actor, but they only get six episodes, and then they got to pay all their expenses. They really haven't really, all they're really doing really is making a feature film for the season. It's basically the same length as a feature film, right? 6 weeks.
Kind of. I mean, yeah. Look, the other thing is we don't have as many long-running series again as we used to. We used to have quite a few that were running year-round, and they were drama series. A lot of cop shows. I don't know what that is about the industry. We all love a good cop show for some reason, and it happens everywhere. It's not just here. But we don't have any at the moment, I don't think, that are long-running. But we do have things like soaps. So we've got Home and Away in Sydney, and we've got Neighbours here in Melbourne. And I've got friends that have landed on both of those series in lead roles and are not going anywhere because they can actually live off that quite comfortably because it's year-round employment. But as far as the others, look, people do tend to do other jobs. I know of very high-profile actors here in Australia that have a side hustle working in call centres because no one has to see them. So they work from home and they work on the phone. And I know other actors who've sold computers, and I know other actors. I mean, my secondary job is graphic and web design. So that's what I do.
You built your website.
Yeah,
your website is your website's amazing. I was like, I could get lost in this. This is beautiful. Whoever did this website is top notch.
Thank you.
There is something we can talk about that's very near and dear to your heart, and I'm so glad it is, so we could talk about this. And that is the Bard.
The Bard.
The Bard. You have a huge love affair with the Bard. Me, I'm more of curiosity in the fact that what makes Shakespeare so damn powerful hundreds of years after his passing. Why? I mean, as far as literature is, probably next to the Bible, I think Shakespeare is probably the most influential reading or writing in history. What makes Shakespeare so important?
I think Shakespeare, more than his contemporaries' work that survived, we've lost a lot of work from that period because they were not seen as worth holding on to. A lot of those plays long term, that was very much an industry of entertainment. But his plays survived because his friends banded together and put a book of them together after he passed. But I think Shakespeare in particular is very good at observing and then presenting the human condition. And so all of his characters are incredibly well-rounded people. They're very relatable people, even if they're a king or a pauper or anyone in between. we can recognize either ourselves or someone we know in those characters. They're incredibly well observed characters and well written characters. And they all have their flaws and their foibles as well as their, greatness. And I think he was just a master at taking human nature and putting it very clearly on the page. And it's really relatable. The characters particularly are really relatable. And I think that's why he endures, because we still see ourselves in those people that he wrote. And they're really good reminders of the fact that even though 400 odd years have passed since he wrote those plays, human beings haven't really changed much. So technology
No,
might have.
they really haven't, have they? I mean, if you really take away the technology, if you just take, if you took 100 human beings from Shakespeare time and 100 human beings from here and put them in a room, and put them in one outfit, you really wouldn't know who was who and what period they came. You get an
No.
accent, maybe, but you wouldn't, I guess it all depends what the questions would be, but you really wouldn't know. If you didn't know any better, you wouldn't know. What person came from, from the 1700s to, or the 1800s, 1600s to today's world. It's fascinating to me.
It is. And we don't change. Our core way of operating doesn't change. And we still have all the same emotions. And and look, as everybody knows, current world events, we also don't tend to learn from history, so we repeat it. So it's interesting that Shakespeare has a lot to say to us about a lot of different things, and also gives us warnings and heads up about things if we actually pay attention, about how things can go, because he didn't just obviously write his tragedies and his comedies, he also wrote his histories. And even though those histories, there's been some artistic license taken, of course, because it's been written for the theatre, but the core motivations of people, the core needs of the characters for power, for love, for assurance, for whatever, we can relate to all of that because we're still seeing it going on around us today. So the barrier for Shakespeare is often the language, but if you can get through that, and that's usually by seeing a production that's being performed by actors who actually know what they're saying with Shakespeare's language, that's helpful. You'll find that, get through that. And he is literally doing what he says in his play, which is holding a mirror up to nature. He's basically going, this is what you look like as a human being and as a human society. And I think that's what people, whether they consciously know it or not, that's what people tap into when they really enjoy a Shakespeare production. It's not just the great acting or the great set design or costumes or whatever. It's they've had a cathartic experience.
What attracted to you on it? I mean, most young actors, the first thing that there's like a couple of names that are always mentioned when they first start out, whether it be training at university or acting school, what have you. One would probably be Chekhov, and two would be Shakespeare. Every single time, their training always, it goes back to those two. Why is it only those two that have remained so vital when you think about other playwrights or writers, and their work is probably more well preserved, but it's not nearly used it's not nearly used as Shakespeare is. Everybody always goes back to Shakespeare. And is it what is it? Is it the language itself? It can't be, maybe it is, but I mean, and if it is, I don't mean to offend, but it can't be that simplistic in order to dress up in the Shakespeare in the round, to dress up in the costumes and go into the round like Edinburgh and do Shakespeare because I want to dress up like him. It can't be that simple. There's got to be something. It's got to be something more to it that has made Shakespeare so long lasting.
It's the challenge of Shakespeare, I think, for actors. I mean, I had one actor say to me, Shakespeare is like the Mount Everest of acting. And I think that's a really good way of looking at it, because if you're performing Shakespeare, particularly on stage, but even on screen, you have to have your A game. And the reason you do is that the language is not only alien to us now, it's Old English. We don't talk like that anymore. Our modern English has its roots in that language, in that version of English, but it is like a foreign language. But it's not only that; it's also, so intellectually you've got to really know what you're doing and understand it. It's also a very muscular language because it's so flowery and descriptive. So you better have your instrument working at top gear to be able to do it properly. You've got to be able to have your voice working incredibly well. And physically, you also really need stamina to actually do Shakespeare if you're going to do it well. So it's a Mount Everest of acting, essentially. That's what draws actors to Shakespeare. And I think a lot of people outside of acting in the industry sort of figure that if you can do Shakespeare, you can do anything. So that's also an additional reason that actors want to tackle it.
So you think it's more of a more actors do Shakespeare and do, like, if we want you to do a scene, you do a monologue, come out there and do a monologue. Do you think that's the reason why a lot of actors will revert back to Shakespeare, is because it is like the top of the food chain? It's like, if you can get away, if you can do, okay, that makes sense.
Totally.
I've only seen one Shakespeare play live. But of course, the one thing I remember about Shakespeare is they had a movie, and it was the first time I ever saw it. And I actually thought, well, that's got to be absolutely just hard as hell to do it, And that was Much Ado About Nothing.
Oh, Emma Thompson and Kenneth Branagh.
Oh, that's so lovely,
isn't it?
I absolutely love that movie so much.
Me too. Denzel Washington and Keanu Reeves, and oh my goodness, what a cast! Yes, yeah.
I mean, well, it really is Kenneth Branagh and Emma Thompson. It's them and everybody else.
That's right.
And yeah.
Yep.
And I you just sit there and you watch that, and you just sit there and you just marvel at it. I'm impressed with everybody else too, though, because it's like that had to be so hard to rehearse, and because it's not natural. The language they're speaking is English, but it's not natural to the actors. And I just can't imagine how hard that must have been for them to try to get into those shoes.
Well, Ken Branagh, of course. I mean, that's a really good example, by the way, of actors creating their own work. Can I just say? Because that is Ken Branagh and Emma Thompson's, that was their project. They put that together. They created that. They made that happen. I mean, they were further along in their career. They already had credits, but that was definitely their baby. And look, Kate Beckinsale was in it as well. I've just remembered she played Hero.
Hero.
I mean, it's an amazing cast. Kenneth Branagh is somebody who is basically, I mean, there's a few in England that are obsessed with Shakespeare, but he's the one who has been very obsessed with Shakespeare. He directs it, he acts it, and he's got a system, I think, of working with actors that maybe have not had as much experience, that brings them to the text fairly easily. Now, I say easily, there will be work, obviously, on the actor's part. But as far as helping them interpret text and understand what they're saying, from what I've worked with Kenneth's sister, who's also a director, and she's got an amazing way of interpreting the works as well. And I just think there's a real innate sense of understanding what Shakespeare is saying that he manages to actually pass on to everybody else. As far as rehearsal goes, and this is the other thing, it doesn't happen as much, I don't think, in US. I mean, it might in US film, but they would have rehearsed that a lot before filming. You would have had to, because of the language, apart from anything else, and make sure everybody was on the same page and had the same kind of approach to the way things were being played.
I was just so impressed at the fact that they agreed to do it. Most of the time, you take a Shakespearean play and then you make it into, I think it was a King Richard III or what the one with Ian McKellen.
And Ian, yeah.
yeah, I don't think they did all. It was Shakespearean, but it was set in a different time frame. I don't think he was all. I don't think it was all. Everything was in Shakespearean. I don't have to go back,
It
but I
was, no, it was, the whole thing was Shakespeare's text.
but I
But
think that actually I think that came out first, and I think that's the reason
right.
why maybe Much Ado About Nothing said, well, hey, if he could do that with King, I don't. It wasn't King Lear. It was
No, it
King
was Richard III. You were
Richard.
right, Richard III.
And
Yep.
and I remember watching that. I remember watching. I don't remember much of it. The only thing I remember more was it was set in a different time frame. It was like
It
it was
was set in a, it was kind of pre-World War II Germany.
right. And so then they came out there, and then they came out there, and I did Much Ado About Nothing, which really sparked, like I know that I know like over in the UK, I'm not sure about Australia, but I know in the UK they absolutely love Jane Austen. Holy cow,
They do. Yes, they
they
do.
do love Jane. I mean, I think she has like 6 books in her name. Boy, but they it's every other year they're running out again. They're running out again.
Right.
Not necessarily a bad thing, because they keep the language pure and true. But wow, it's there's just not that many wordsmiths, a lover of the words like those folks. And to me, I'm like,
This is it.
most of the time, I've always felt like we don't need another King Arthur movie. We don't need another. We don't need another. We don't need. We don't, because there's so many of them. We don't need another Robin
Yeah.
Hood movie. We don't need. But you know what? Whenever there's a Shakespeare movie, like they did an update. J.J. Abrams did a was it him or Josh Weldon?
Yeah,
Josh
no, it was
Weldon.
Joss Whedon. Is that who you're thinking
Yeah,
of?
with Clark Gregg and Amy Acker, and they did an update version of Much Ado
Yep.
About Nothing.
Yep.
Didn't have the same impact by half. Lost
Sadly,
it.
no.
I love those actors, and I gave them props, but there's just no way in hell that they're walking in the same shoes as Much Ado About Nothing. It was such a lovely movie. I still get misty eyed, and I still feel Benedict's fury and Sean Leonard. I still feel that, when you watch it.
Yeah.
I guess
Yeah.
I'm sort of answering some of my own questions. Like, as an actor, man, to see that and I want to do that.
Yeah.
A lot of actors, they want to do action, they want to do fun. To me, I want to do that with the emotion and the passion.
Yeah.
And I guess that basically I guess that's really the older writers, they that's the reason why I guess they're immortal, right? I mean, a lot of the playwrights that we know today that have been around for a lot less, they're forgotten. Nobody really remembers them until they do what they call a revival. I'm going to
Yeah.
revive this. Well, Shakespeare has never, that's one thing you don't equate with both Chekhov on a lesser scale, but with Shakespeare for sure is you never hear anybody say, "I'm reviving a Shakespeare play." You never hear that. You never hear those terms like that, because he's never gone anywhere.
Well, this is it. I mean, look, the irony is that when I'm actually dyslexic. So when I first started acting, I announced I would never do Shakespeare because my first encounter with Shakespeare was reading it out of a book in English class, which is the worst way, can I just say, to be introduced to Shakespeare, dyslexic or otherwise, because the language is hard. And so I actually couldn't even get 2 lines of Romeo and Juliet out. It was a completely foreign language to me. I had no idea what I was looking at. And I was so embarrassed in class that I couldn't do that I swore Shakespeare off aged 14 and said, I'm never doing this. I'm an actor, but I don't need to do Shakespeare. And I was like that right the way through to getting to drama school. I had to learn a Shakespeare piece to get into drama school. It was like pulling teeth. I hated it. I got into drama school, and then we had to write dissertation subjects about a period of history of acting. So everything from the Greeks right the way through. And we had to pull our subject out of a hat. That's how they made it fair. And I got Elizabethan theatre, and I was so upset. I did not want it. I wanted the Greeks. I didn't want to know about it. And my Shakespeare teacher at drama school, the fabulous Phil Peacock, who I adore and is a brilliant teacher and brilliant Shakespearean, said to me, "You're living and working in London where Shakespeare lived and worked. Why don't you just go and walk around where he would have walked and get a sense of the world he was inhabiting when he lived here and what he was writing about?" And I was like, all right, fine, whatever. And it happened to be at a time when the Globe Theatre was being built. So that's dating me. Anyone looking that up will know, will know my age, but they were finishing it. It was close to being finished. And so I thought, all right, well, I'll go to the church, which was still standing. I mean, this is the amazingness of England and Britain is, you know, a church from 400 or 500 years ago was still standing, which is where Shakespeare used to go worship. And I went to the pub where Shakespeare would have had a drink. And then I thought, all right, I'll go to the Globe Theatre. And it was interesting for me. What brought me to Shakespeare was the realization that he lived. He was a person who lived, and doing all of that brought that very much home to me, but also a person who was also a commentator on his times through his work. He lived in a very turbulent time in British history where you had great expansion, great curiosity around science, a real appreciation for the arts, but that ran alongside extraordinary poverty, people that, you know, very brutal entertainments such as bear baiting and bull baiting and, you know, dog fighting and things. You still had this amazing gap between the wealthy and the poor. And it was standing on the Globe Theatre stage, which I was very fortunate to be able to do before it was officially open to the public, and looking up at all those tiers of seats. And they actually built the Globe as much as possible in London, according to how they would have built it in the 1500s. So you had people at that moment, while I was standing on the stage, hand thatching the roof, the straw roof, and hand turning all the balustrade rails.
The English are they're amazing when it comes down to architecture like that.
Right.
It really is. It's every time I you know, I watch a movie and I'll you know, I watched one the other day, and just it was a BBC one, and from 2014, and even the smaller houses they featured are just freaking amazing. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, the architecture. I'm not shocked to see it hand built like that.
I mean, they were really trying to be as authentic as they could be with the way they recreated it. And I think I mean, look, it was funny because I was having a chat with the architects because they happened to be there during the time I was there. And there was a big conversation going on about where the pillars needed to go on the stage because there'd been no actual record left of where the pillars that hold up the heavens, as they're called, on that stage, which is the big canopy that's got angels and things painted on it. There was no record of where they were supposed to go. And they said to me, "Do you want to get up on the stage and say something?" And I was like, "Really? Am I allowed to do that?" And they were like, "Well, you're a drama student. Off you go." And that's what. So I was up. At that point, I didn't really know a lot of Shakespeare other than my audition speech, and I was a singer as well. I'd been in musical theatre prior to that. So I ended up singing Amazing Grace, which was, they said, just test the acoustics. You'll get a sense of how good the acoustics are.
Right.
That was a transformative moment for me. I wasn't even doing Shakespeare. I was singing a song that wouldn't be written for another 300 or 400 years or however long it was. But there was something about being in that space on that stage with watching hand crafting going on from these artisans for these, important parts of the building that just suddenly felt like I'd time jumped to the Elizabethan period. And I don't know, I downloaded Shakespeare. That's what I think happened in that moment. I honestly can't explain it, but I teach Shakespeare now, which is hilarious, considering how I was so anti-Shakespeare before I went to drama school. But I teach it because a big part of that is getting people to realize that there was a history here and a really rich history of human experience that he worked into his texts. And I kind of got that sense of all those people that he wrote about and the fact he wasn't just writing about them, but because we're all human, he was writing about us. and
What
it
makes
suddenly made sense to me.
how do you teach how in your when you looking through your eyes, how do you teach Shakespeare that's different from other teachers? Because you think of, well, I'm just gonna go ahead and teach Shakespeare. I'll grab the book, I'll get out there and teach them. What makes you stand out as a teacher? What is it? Is it the fact that you fell in love with him, a little later? And how do you adjust your way you teach Shakespeare, you teach acting? Do you base it based on your own overcoming your dyslexia? Um, because there's when I was looking over through your website,
Mm.
I was reading, there's definitely here's a lot of your acting here, but it's like Shakespeare's like way the hell up here. You need a ladder to come down here. Like I've done a lot of great work, but when it comes down to like Shakespeare, like including that into my repertoire, it's way up here. I mean, it's more intense than most everybody I've ever talked to about it. And I'm trying to capture that, like what burns in your heart, and how do you translate that to teaching? I mean, like someone like me, if I came inside your classroom tomorrow,
Mhm.
and
Which you could come in tonight. I am doing an online course right now on Shakespeare at the moment. But yes, if you were to come, well, and actually, I do teach a lot of non-actors. I teach actors as well. But at the moment, funnily, I've got a lot of actors that would classify themselves as non-actors, as in don't act. They're just curious about Shakespeare at the moment that I'm working with. Um, I think what makes me different as a teacher generally is that I don't have one size fits all. So I don't teach, much like you were talking about before, that you don't have your same set of questions for every guest. I don't have the same approach for every student. There are going to be things that are similar. They're going to get taught technique, but I'll always meet the student where they're at. So if I have a student that's got a lot of Shakespeare experience, I will adjust what I'm teaching so that they can still walk away with having gained something. I'll jump to their level. If I'm working with someone who's never done any acting before, definitely never done any Shakespeare before, I approach it differently. I will tailor it to a different way so that I can bring them into the fold and work with them so they've gained quite a bit by the end. My big one is always making sure that actors are always challenged, but not to the point where they are overwhelmed. And that they're always going to come out at the end feeling like they've won something or they've learned something. That's really important. The difference is too, I tend to use, so on my acting technique background is predominantly Uta Hagen's work. So that comes into it sometimes as well. And the other thing is I don't focus on what a lot of other Shakespeare teachers focus on, which is things like iambic pentameter, and rhythm and gestures. I don't teach any of that. It's not that I don't believe in iambic pentameter, because it's definitely a thing, but I find that if I can get the actors to understand their characters and what their character wants and why their character is doing what they're doing, and understand the language, that the rhythm of the text takes care of itself. We only tend to use it if someone gets stuck, as far as not quite being able to say the words naturally. But iambic pentameter is the same as your heartbeat. So if you are truly connected to your character and truly understand what you're saying, you're going to end up speaking the pentameter anyway without thinking about it. And it's going to come out sounding natural because you're not thinking about it.
Shakespeare, can anybody overact Shakespeare?
Oh, yeah. Yes, they can. People overact Shakespeare all the time.
Do they
And the
meet?
biggest
I mean,
reason,
some people try. I mean, I'm talking about just like if they're trying to do their level best to do the words justice.
yeah,
I mean, there's some that do it for exaggeration, like watching Michael Keaton in Much Ado About Nothing. He looked like he looked like he was just hamming it. It's just like Jesus. He's a ham. But
he is.
but that was deliberate. He was
Yes,
supposed to be that way.
yeah.
But if someone was trying to play Benedict or Beatrice, do people, do they tend to overact on Shakespeare at all? And if they do, Is it because they're intimidated by the words, by the by the characters?
Yep.
It is, isn't it? Man.
It's because they're working from the outside in, but they haven't actually got to the inner world of the character. They're still stuck on the outside of the character because they're terrified, and that is sense. I get it. I totally get it. Been there, done that. So as far as how I felt about Shakespeare, which I think also makes me different as a teacher. I wasn't in love with Shakespeare since I was 5. I didn't read all the plays when I was 12.
Right,
I
right.
know what it is to be scared of the language. I know what it is to be intimidated by the work. So I think that's also my point of difference as a teacher. I never come to a class expecting all my students to be in love with Shakespeare, and quite a few aren't. I mean, I taught on faculty at a drama school here, and I was getting kids that were not wanting to be in the room for the same reasons that I was exactly like that when I was their age. So I never come to it expecting everybody's in love with the bard. By the time they leave, they're less antagonistic towards him. But I never walk in the room expecting everybody's on the same page, because they're not. They're human. They're not going to be. If Shakespeare teaches us anything, it's that we're all different. So no one's going to be completely in love with it. And I have students that come to my other classes who come because they think they should rather than they want to. Because again, it's Shakespeare and everyone feels they should understand how to learn it. So how to do it. So yeah, I think that's the other point of difference. I don't ever presume that everybody's in love with Shakespeare, but I'm there to teach them how to come to grips with his text and his characters. And really, to be honest, once you get through the language, it's no different to approaching any other character that's written today, because he's writing about people who
I
lived.
was going to say, I think if you let me ask you this question here from our friend Phil Leo. He says, did Lee Strasberg's method acting incorporate Lamech? I missed Pacino doing his Shakespeare in the Park a few years ago. I guess I don't know. It's when I asked about the overacting, I was actually thinking about Pacino. I know he had done some Shakespeare, and as well as Ian McKellen and what have you. Is it so much overacting, as far as because Pacino has a reputation for sometimes being bigger than life. Is it because they're trying to impress? Why do you think several actors, including veteran actors, why do you think they tend to overplay like a playwright like Chekhov or a Shakespeare? Why do you think that happens? Is it, like, I still go back to the intimidation factor. Even an actor as skilled as Pacino is, I'm sure when he got out there or Edinburgh, I'm sure every time they get out there and they did it, it's got to be just absolutely mind racking, even for an actor with 30 or 40 years worth of experience.
It can be very confronting. But I think, look, there can be two reasons the overacting thing happens, particularly with established actors that have got experience. One can be direction. If you have a director that is all about, make sure you hit them between the eyes, that is really hard for an actor, and you will overact because you'll want to reach the audience. That can be reason number one. And number two, it can simply be that, again, they're still working externally, as I put it. So they're not, you mentioned the Strasberg method. I would not use that method with Shakespeare. And the major reason that I wouldn't is because you don't want to be taking Richard III home with you. You certainly don't want to be taking Titus Andronicus home with you. You don't want to be taking Macca's Lord M from the Scottish play home with you, or even Lady M actually later in the play, because he's got some pretty intense characters that you really do want to leave at the door. You don't want to have them living in your home.
Oh, yeah.
I think there's a problem with that, because it can sometimes, what can happen is an actor can get completely lost in the role. And the overplaying comes from them trying to stop drowning in the role. And that's, you've got to be very careful what acting technique you're using with some of the, and that doesn't just go for Shakespeare, that goes for any character that is incredibly intense. I think it has its limitations. And look, there are going to be people who will disagree with me because it works for them, and brilliant if it's working for you. As long as you're looking after your mental health, I do not mind. Great, use it. But I think for Shakespeare, living and breathing that character, which is not all of Strasberg's technique, obviously, but it's a big part of it. It's what it's best known for. Yeah, I don't think I'd want to be Richard III 24/7. I think that would
Oh
be
God,
incredibly hard. And you
no.
lose perspective. And I think that can be sometimes part of the problem as well. So you stop feeling it as much. So you overplay it because you're not really feeling it anymore. That can be a part of the problem too. Which is why I always recommend you leave characters at the door when you go home. You don't actually take them home with you. Just has a bad night,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Especially for theatre, they just have a bad night, and that can happen to anyone, no matter how experienced they are.
What do you what do you
So
prefer, what do you prefer? What do you prefer? Do you prefer being on stage versus screen? And before you answer that, let me get our friend Hobbs comes in here. He's got an interesting question. He says, any early inspirations or movies that influenced your career in motion pictures? He killed me with the motion pictures.
gosh,
In motion pictures, have you ever worked at a dinner theater before? Those are
yes.
becoming quite popular in the Midwest.
Oh my goodness, yes, I have. I started in vaudeville. Oh, that's hilarious, which was our dinner theatre. That is so funny. Good
Yeah,
question.
now that's a genre that is being revived. There are a lot more dinner theaters that are up and coming now. Before it was like the murder mysteries and what have you.
Yep,
They were very popular, and then it sort of faded away for a while. But there has been coming back more and more.
it has.
So I was
Great
just wondering.
training ground.
I'm wondering though if you could actually get away with doing a Shakespeare in dinner theater. I think you probably tend to. I don't know. That would be very challenging.
Yeah, it would be. No, I started doing essentially vaudeville. So I was the ingenue. I was the one that was the singer, the young singer who would come out, and then I'd also do the kind of innocent one in all the sketches. And yeah, I did dinner theatre. That's how I started. My first paid job was working in dinner theatre. So that's hilarious that that's coming back. It was huge over here as well for a while. It's not so much anymore, but it was big for quite a time. So yes, I have done dinner theatre, and it's a great training ground because man, do you have to be on your feet because you're dealing with usually a drunk audience. They've been drinking as well as eating. So you're dealing with an audience that's a little merry, and you've got to be on your toes because anything that's going to happen is going to happen in that room, and it's great for keeping you really present and in the moment, and just and really working to not miss a trick. So no, I highly advise if people want to do things like dinner theatre, do it because you'll learn an awful lot. As far as movies, I'm just trying to think.
You have a very good pass. I mean, your background, you got over 40 credits. You also worked on Preacher, which was
Yes.
we got to talk about that because Preacher came out in the States. I think it ran for 4 years. And I think it was mostly, if I'm not mistaken, I believe The Preacher was actually filmed in Australia, was it not?
The fourth season, was shot here in
Okay,
Melbourne,
okay,
which is
because
kind of how I landed the job. So, I was happy with that.
I
It
know
was
that I
great.
know that the original Ghost Rider with Nicolas Cage. I
Yes.
know that was shot in Australia. One of the more popular movies that we've had the last year, called Late Night with the Devil, was also shot in
Yes.
Australia.
Yes.
In fact, it only had one American actor in it, and that was David Dalmatian.
Two.
Otherwise,
There were two.
the other
Christopher
two.
Kirby was the other one, but he lives in Australia, but he's actually American as well.
Okay, so
He was also in Preacher, actually opposite me. So that's, yeah. So, yeah,
now
go on.
why weren't you in Late Night with the Devil?
I wasn't called up to audition
Oh,
for it. So, yeah,
we should.
that's all right.
If we would have known that, we would have fixed that. Um,
done a campaign.
Hobbs mentions he rather enjoys his dinner theater here in Ohio. He lives in Dayton, Ohio, and so they have. I did not know they had a dinner theater in Ohio at that in Dayton. That's really cool, actually.
That
We
is
only
cool.
have, you know what? We only have most of the time with those dinner theaters, they're not really in big cities. They're like the only one that's closest to me. It's in a small town called Northville,
Oh,
and
wow.
it's a very small town. And I live between Ann Arbor and my town that I live in is 100,000 people. Ann Arbor is pretty big, and then you have Detroit. But as far as
Mm.
dinner theater goes, I only know one, and it's in a small town, so that's interesting. Um, see, Phil mentioning, let's see, Phil's mentioning, honey, must I suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous misfortune, your meatloaf, of your misfortune of your meatball recipe? Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I can see that now. Method acting the menu. Let's
Correct.
see.
And there's a quote for every occasion, really, even if it's slightly misquoted too. It works perfectly fine. Yeah, absolutely. No, I think look, again, I don't like to tell actors how to operate. As a director, I will always work with an actor with whatever technique is their primary technique, um, because that's how you get the best work out of an actor, is not imposing the way you do things on them from a technique perspective. As a director, I'm already asking them to hit marks and, you know, be a certain turn their face a certain way for lighting or whatever else. So as far as technique goes, and how they're approaching the work, I don't tend to tell them how they should be doing that, because that's just going to upset the apple cart. But I will always, again, I rehearse all my actors. I mean, I have directed Shakespeare on stage, but I predominantly in the last decade directed Shakespeare on screen, and we always rehearse for that reason before filming, so that they've got time to digest the direction, have a think about the dialogue, do some more homework on the character. So by the time they land on set, they are ready to go. And I highly, any filmmakers listening to this, if you can build rehearsal time in with your actors, do it, because it actually gives your actors a chance to really embody the characters. Forget if it's Shakespeare, for anything that you're doing, gives them a chance to really embody the characters. So, yeah. So again, I don't personally follow Strasberg's method, but if it works for you and you, as I said, mentally healthy with it, brilliant, go for it, do it. I've got no objections. I think actors need to be very careful about how much they let others, I've got to give what I say here, but have to be very careful with their mental health generally. I mean, we all do, to be honest, whether you're an actor or otherwise. I think in the world, particularly right now where there are so many stresses, we all need to look after ourselves. But
Sure.
actors are quite open to a lot of influences that can be
Look
unhealthy.
what happened to one of look what happened to one of the greatest Australian actors we've had in a long time, and he cracked. Heath Ledger, he passed away. After
Yeah.
overloading, he couldn't get rid of a character. Talk to us a little bit
Yeah,
about
because he was, Go
Can
on.
you talk to us a little bit about the Shakespeare Republic?
Shakespeare Republic, which started it all for the screen stuff. Yeah, so Shakespeare Republic began in 2015, and that was it's a web series, and it began. One of the things when I became a born again Shakespearean, as I jokingly call myself, at drama school, I went back to work for the BBC, and I actually wrote my first film back then that we also filmed in London. Wasn't Shakespeare. It was different genre. But I remember a friend saying to me at the time, you should get an honorary patron or something, which is a thing that happens in England, which doesn't tend to happen. I mean, it happens a little bit elsewhere, but when you're an independent company, it's rare to do it outside of England. Anyway, it's also very much a hangover from the Elizabethan period, when they used to have patrons of theatre companies, which basically guaranteed them some respectability. Anyway, I reached out to several British actors that I knew who were also involved in either producing or directing, and Sir Nigel Hawthorne was the person who responded to say that he would be, as he put it, delighted to be my honorary patron. So Sir Nigel Hawthorne, for those that might not know, he played Sir Humphrey Appleby in the series Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister, which is probably going back to the 80s, 70s and 80s. and was also played King George III in The Madness of King George, which was the film he got Oscar nominated for, opposite Helen Mirren. So Nigel Hawthorne, bless him, said yes. And he was a member of the Royal Shakespeare Company. And I remember saying to him, I really want other people to have an easy entryway into Shakespeare, because getting someone to read a whole play or even go and see a whole play can feel quite intimidating, and people don't really, not everyone wants to do that. I kind of want to do bite-sized Shakespeare and maybe do it for the screen. And he said, look, that's a great idea, but there's really nowhere for that to live, particularly in England at that time. We didn't have web series back then. The internet was a thing, but we certainly didn't have this. We certainly didn't have this sort of stuff like a podcast here or a web series happening in this sort of volume it does now. So no one had really thought about doing that. And I said, all right, well, I'll just shelve the idea. Anyway, we fast forward probably a decade. Oh, not quite. It was a few years later. And actually, no, it was a decade. Now I think about it, it was a decade later. And I was working on a feature documentary that I was directing, because again, I do other things other than acting, because not enough acting. So do other things. So I did the feature doc and just needed a break. And that's when this idea suddenly came to me of bite-sized Shakespeare again. And I went, oh, wait a minute, there's a thing called web series. We could do that now. Mm-hmm. So essentially I call it the experiment. It still gets called that, just to take the pressure off so that we can have a play. And it's essentially, it's kind of shifted slightly, but Shakespeare Republic predominantly is monologues. So it's one actor on camera looking down the barrel of the lens, like I am now, performing a character and a monologue from Shakespeare. So it started with 6 actors. Those actors were friends of mine that I just rang up and said, hey, want to do some Shakespeare? Let's have a play and see what happens. So I don't know if I don't think you get Neighbours over there, which is one of our soaps, but Alan Fletcher, Dr. Carl Kennedy on Neighbours, is one of my actors that's actually been almost all the way through the series. He's known very much for playing that character on one of our soaps, but a lot of people don't know he started as a Shakespearean actor, and he's actually a beautiful Shakespearean actor. So I was very excited to bring him in. So he played Lord M in the first season and then went on to play Jacques from As You Like It in the second. But it's monologues to camera, essentially, but it's set in contemporary settings. So the whole premise was, it's created to sort of drop as many barriers as possible for people to engage with Shakespeare. You only invest 3 to 4 minutes of your time to watch a monologue with an actor that you may or may not know, set in modern settings. And so that's how it started. And then essentially it's filmed properly. It's not like they're in a black box theater and doing it. They're in a circumstance. The first season had someone in a public bathroom, somebody else in a bath. I don't know. There was a big theme of bathrooms in that first season. I was sitting on a cliff top doing Sonnet 18. Someone else was in offices, high-end political offices, being a political advisor. So, but they were all Shakespeare characters, and all the text performed as written. And then season 2 expanded further, and we got more ambitious. And then season 3 was in 2020, and we all know what happened in 2020. Right. Season 3 was a result of what happened in 2020, which was the Lockdown Chronicles, All the Webster stage. That was the third season.
I was going to say that for your format, for what it is, they're coming in there and then you film the dialogue, and then COVID. In a sense, COVID would have been like a blessing, because you don't have very, it's a very small setup. You get actors in. How many people were there? It was you, the actor, and one other PA?
For the third season.
Yeah.
No, just me and the actor.
Oh, okay.
We were everything.
See, Phil says, what UK town is Sally's lovely Brit accent from? I only know that it's not Cockney. I'm not hearing that. I'm still hearing you speaking Australian.
That's good. That's fine.
Yeah.
It's influenced by West London.
West London. Okay, West London. Tom says, Patrick, you have the best guest. I am blessed. I told you, I said before this show tonight, says I am blessed to get once in a while I'll get it right. I'll get it right. And this is one of those nights for sure. I'm so happy. Um, I have a request. Can I make a request? I don't know if you know the person or not, but if you do, I have a request.
Hmm.
Um, could you get Gia Corretis to do one of your Shakespeare?
I don't know Gia personally, but I'm sure I could find her. I'm thinking.
I would love to see
Yes, I think I've got 2 degrees of separation, so I might be able to.
I
Maybe I can. That's your request.
I love Gia Corretis. But you won't know why. You won't even guess to how I found her. She's probably one of my favorite Australian actresses. I love her so much, and it's like because we're talking about taking chances and doing dares.
Hmm.
So she did a show in beginning of her career that most of the people here that I talked to were all fanboys. We like science fiction and horror and everything else.
Yes.
And Gio Corretis did a show. You might have even remembered it if you lived in Australia at the time, but it only lasted a season. And she did an Ultraman. She did an Ultraman. She was based in Australia. I'll give
Yep.
anybody an extra bonus point if anybody's ever seen the Australian version of Ultraman, like I did. I love
That's
that show so
hilarious.
much. That was my first introduction to Gia Caritas. I didn't see her until I saw her with my wife in Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Wow. That's interesting. See, I've known Gia from doing like just basic cop dramas because that's where
Really?
everyone started usually here.
See, I need. I see. I know. I need to. It's like funny. Like I actually, I'm her ex-husband, which I can't understand that for the life of me. But her like, why did you let that happen? Why did you let that happen? But she married Anthony LaPaglia,
Yep.
and then yeah, that's yeah. I couldn't understand when I read that. Well, they're breaking up. I'm going like, what the hell is that all about? Um,
It can be pressures of the acting world. It's very hard when two actors are married to each other, I think. I don't know that it's always a great idea because sometimes it can just get a bit much.
you might be right about that. Okay. See, what is Sally's favorite Shakespearean play?
Oh,
Um, yes, that's a really good question.
it
I mean,
changes.
I would
It does
suspect.
change,
I
but
would, I
it kind of
suspect.
all right, let me have a think. Well, okay, one of two. I've got two that at the moment definitely flip back and forth. So Much Ado About Nothing is one of them. And people might wonder why I don't say the full name of the play. It's an actor superstition, but the Scottish play, as it's known, which is about the guy whose name starts with Mac. Because actors won't. I know I'm not in a rehearsal room. Technically, I'm allowed to say the name. I mean, we've done so many pieces from that play, but because I actually do my some of my rehearsal work via Zoom and in this space, I'm not going to say the name because it's supposed to bring you bad luck. But yeah, that's the other one. Macbeth. That would be the other one.
I think I
That's because I'm
surprised
working
somebody.
on both of them too at the
I think
moment.
I
Sorry,
surprised.
go on.
I think I surprised our friend Tom with the fact that I knew that Anthony and his brother Jonathan are Australian.
Oh yeah. Although
Yeah.
Anthony spent a lot of his early time in the US never letting on that he was Australian. He'd go into auditions with an American accent, even in the chat with the direct casting directors and others, because he was over there at a time when Australians were not really flavor of the month. So he just pretended he was from New York.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah, I knew that he was. I mean, once you see him, as soon as you see Anthony and Jonathan, you know they're related. They look so much
Oh yeah,
alike. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
All right.
In fact, I think Jonathan's hosting Survivor over here at the moment. I'm not sure. Anyway, go on.
Let's see. Phil wants to know, are you presently an Aussie or a Kiwi? I guess you would be more of an Aussie right now, right?
I'm an Aussie. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Although I
Yeah,
love New Zealand. Can I just say I love New Zealand, and I'm very happy they're our closest neighbour. They've got a beautiful country, and they're very lovely people. They are.
they do.
If
They
I could
do.
live there, I would.
Man, I have still been trying very hard to get at least one person to talk to somebody over there in New Zealand. I have not yet to get anybody, guest wise, off of New Zealand. I've tried, but I have not yet. But now I'm excited.
Okay.
I'm excited. Now I'm excited to actually. Now, does your the Shakespeare Republic? How do you plan that out? Do you just, because that's a since it's a since it's like a web series? Do you just
Hmm.
go around? How do you organize it? How do you organize it to how many episodes do you do per season and what have you?
Oh, it's an interesting thing. So, um, Shakespeare Republic as the series, because of course it's got two spin-off series now and also a short film, because why not have a universe rather than just the one series? So
Right.
it's also got Speaking Daggers, which is the short film, and Walking Shadows, which is the student version of Shakespeare Republic with student actors that are drama grads, recent drama grads, and then Dark Arcadia, which is the most recent series
Right.
that was on the circuit last year, which is a totally different approach to Shakespeare as well. It's not monologues, and not all of them are monologues actually either. But as far as Shakespeare Republic, which is the core series and predominantly monologues, a lot of it comes down to, so initially I'll sort of pick a theme or pick a setting, and then have a chat with actors that I know are interested in being part of it. It tends to be Shakespeare Republic to this point has been by invitation rather than audition. So I work with actors that I know or actors that have reached out and said that they'd like to do some work with me. And when I did third season, I suddenly could have actors all around the world because we were doing it all on Zoom, as far as the rehearsal and stuff goes. And then I would be on a Zoom call while they were filming themselves on their camera or their phone, directing them through Zoom. So I was directing Shakespeare at 3 a.m. So whoever was on the call before who said it was 4 a.m. where they are, I totally hear you. I relate. But that was it. So that's kind of how it starts. I'll choose a theme or I'll choose a setting, and then I'll start having conversations with actors to kind of see who's around, who's interested. And that tends to dictate then how many episodes. So what was interesting is that season 1, I was very rigid with my planning. I was like, it's going to be 6 episodes. We're just going to start small. I know the actors I want to talk to. We're going to do an eclectic sort of, it's not really going to be themed. It'll be an eclectic group of monologues. It'll be entirely what the actors are also interested in doing and what I'm interested in directing. And then I realized that I probably couldn't run it like that for the entire season and the ongoing seasons, because that's a lot of work, because there's a lot of back and forth with the actors. Oh, I might play Juliet. Actually, maybe I'll play Beatrice. It's like, oh. So I amended it slightly, which was, here are 3 monologues. Which one do you want to play?
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
and then it was, I mean, look, there was still room. If they were really adamant and said, I really want to play this character, then of course I would make that work. We would find a piece that would work with the overall theme. But generally it was a case of offering them three options and sort of saying, which one are you most resonating with? And that's kind of how it also worked for the season 3. I mean, I was a little more prescriptive there in the sense that it was lockdown, and all of those characters in season 3 had to be in some form of lockdown. So we were kind of limited to a point as to what could be done. But then I was also really surprised as to some of the speeches that fit perfectly within a lockdown or a pandemic scenario. It was surprising, actually. Probably shouldn't be surprised, because Shakespeare lived through 3 or 4 plague outbreaks. So I'm quite sure,
Right. Right.
it reflects that in his work. But
I'm trying to think yeah, he was there during the 1500s, so he was there during the Dark Ages, during the yeah, he lived
bubonic
in,
plague,
yeah.
yes, that lovely thing when they killed all the cats because they thought it was the cats, and it wasn't the cats. And then the rats and the fleas got carried away, and next thing you know, the entire city of London is locked down.
Where the plague came from, right? During the Dark Ages, who was responsible for all that?
Oh,
Not a
I know it
controversial.
was Please, but I'm not sure where from.
Definitely not controversial, but it's actually definitely true. If you want to go back and want to find out why the Dark Ages, the plague, just almost destroyed Europe, just take a small trip to the Vatican. That was all. It was all there.
Ah,
Yeah,
ah, bless. Yes. Okay. Of course. Why am I surprised?
yeah.
But yes, I mean, look, the other problem too is that science was not great at that time
No,
either.
no, no. They
So,
anybody that spoke in science, they were killed.
well, pretty much. And
Yeah,
the issue, right? And so the issue was whatever had happened to initially have this plague outbreak, no one actually knew how it was spreading, which is why they made stupid decisions
no,
like, let's kill all the cats. No, really
yeah.
stupid. Anyway,
Anybody that knows anything about about medicine, they were killed. I mean, they were yeah. It was actually
well, this
funny.
is it.
They're a different subject, but if I I'm thinking about Shakespeare and as we're talking about history, and sometimes you see things happen that you don't expect to see happen, and as far as the movies go and what have you. Like I never thought we'd ever see a movie like I really never thought we'd see anything like Much Ado About Nothing. I was so
Mm,
pleasantly surprised. I think everybody was when that movie came out because it was like the first time that I thought it made Shakespeare relatable to everybody.
yes.
Because
Yes.
most people you mention Shakespeare and they're going like, huh?
Yeah.
But that movie brought it down to the masses and they all got involved. I know that I did. After I saw it,
Yeah.
I started reading Shakespeare. I was intrigued by it. I was like, wow, this is really cool. I'm really hooked. Let me
Well, this is
quickly go.
this is it. And I just wanted to say too, with Shakespeare Republic, one of our big things, even we call it bite-sized Shakespeare, which it is. It's a monologue or a scene or whatever. But one of our big rules is that whatever setting we put it into and however we present it, it should be able to slot back into the play and still make sense.
Yes.
Because we want people to, look at the bigger pieces of the Shakespeare puzzle rather than just, I mean, and some people just happily dive in and do the short stuff with us, but we've actually get that feedback from our audiences as well, that suddenly they're really enjoying Shakespeare and they've suddenly understood it a bit better. And which is the whole point of why I was doing it in the first place, was to bring people to it that might not normally have engaged. So, Much Ado About Nothing probably would have been an influence on that, I think, on the approach for screen to a degree. They set it very much in the period the play is set, although it's not really specified what period they're in the play, but it's set in a time that would be appropriate if you were going to perform it for the time it was written. But they managed to make it really contemporary despite that and really relatable. And yeah, that's also an influence. I mean, I've got a lot of respect for Kenneth Branagh's work with Shakespeare, definitely. Yeah.
We have a couple more comments before we end the show here. Phil mentions, we're talking about Brian Brown. Let's see, thoughts on
We love
Brian
Brian Brown. He's great. National treasure.
National treasure. That's right. Brian Brown was a very well-known actor in the 80s and 90s. I remember him as Rolly in FX. He was.
Correct.
Oh, I love that movie. FX and FX2.
Mm-hmm.
The Sam Neill, New Zealand's best export. Sam
Yes.
Neill's amazing. Says Phil mentions I have Melbourne chef Curtis Stone's cookbook in his library. My first Aussie visit will definitely include a Shakespearean play and concert by killer Aussie cover band, the Hindley Street Country Club. Now, yeah, I mean, I would love to go visit Australia myself. I definitely would. Tom mentions about the Dark Ages. Yes, it will happen again. Definitely will. Let's see. Giordano Bruno refused to recant like Galileo and burn at the stake. Yes. At the Dark Ages. Yes. The Spanish Inquisition. You're more likely talking about. Let's see. Yeah, everybody's asking everybody about if they're into acting. Well, you know what? I feel like I never acted before too, but I feel like I just went to acting class today. My last question to you, Sally, is what are you got going on for 2025? What's on your plate?
Well, this year marks the 10th anniversary of Shakespeare Republic and related projects. So we're actually looking at doing a couple of events to celebrate that, because that's quite extraordinary that it's still going. So that's something that's definitely front and center at the moment, and we're likely to do an interview series as well, just for public consumption, with previous cast members and others. People like Dean Hagland, actually, who was a cast member for season 2, who was on the X-Files as one of the lone gunmen. He played Iago in season 2 for us. He's back in the States now, but yeah, so I'm looking forward to catching up with cast members that I haven't seen and spoken to in a while. That's going to be fun to do that series of chats. And as I said, I'm working on a new drama series, because I'm also a writer myself, and I have been doing a lot of adaptation of Shakespeare, which is fine, but I'd like to do my own writing for a bit. So
Sure.
that's a murder mystery thriller series that I'm in the middle of writing, because my other great love is all things, crime and murder mystery. I also love sci-fi and fantasy. Just so you know, I'm eclectic in my likes and reading and viewing habits. So that's the other thing, and potentially working on a comedy series as well. Maybe, I don't know yet, but definitely, yeah. And acting. I mean, I've actually got a couple of acting gigs that are going to shoot later in the year. So yeah, I just keep on keeping on is what I'm doing. But Shakespeare stuff, yeah, we do possibly have a season 4 potentially of Shakespeare Republic. It's just going to come down to money. So we'll see what happens.
Just contact G and tell her that there's this massive American audience that wants you to do Shakespeare.
Right. As I said, I'm 2 degrees of separation from her, so I possibly could do that. So we'll just see what happens. I've been given my instructions.
Just as an out of the sentence to say, yeah, they loved you and they loved you in Ultraman. That'll close the deal. Promise.
Right. Yep, absolutely.
I keep looking for that on DVD. I keep on hoping, like, one of these days that thing's actually going to come across my way. I'm going to get it. Because it's so hard to get. So hard to get. But I keep looking. I mean, now that Acorn Media has released Kiwi and Aussie crime shows mostly, I still have on other TV shows. I feel like I have a chance at it. All right, boys and girls, that is going to wrap it up for tonight. I want to thank our guest, Sally McLean, to come in. I have her website on the top of the chat. I will also put it down, all her links down in below. You definitely need to go over there and follow her on Instagram and drop her a note. And also, she has a really terrific website. You need to come over there and take a look at that. Tomorrow night we have Frank Marino Boyd will be with us. He is one of those famous Iowa guys from our Iowa actors from Michael James Bernard's crew. He will be here tomorrow night. On Thursday at 3 p.m. We'll be flying back over to the pond to England, this time to the UK, to be talking to our good friend Mike Zahara from Did You See That podcast, and we'll be talking to him at 3:00 on Thursday. There will be no Thursday night show because the Midnight Hour is celebrating its 200th episode, and so we cleared the decks for that. We hear it's going to be like a 7-hour long live stream with plenty of celebrity guests on. So you want to talk to Hobbs Horror about that? I'm not sure who he's going to have on, but it will be fun, whatever it is. All right. You stay there, Sally, just for a second. I'm going to say goodnight to the chat who came out here and really delivered tonight. I really appreciate it. And we'll be back tomorrow night. And hopefully we'll see some of you back tomorrow night, too. Have a great night and stay warm. Peace.